Hi, everybody. Tom Van Hoy with Russ Jewett on this week's Cross Country Insider Show. After a week off, Pitt State men and women competing in the Fort Hays Invitational last Saturday. Women finished second among 17 schools. Adams State won. The Gorillas tops among MIAA schools there. Nebraska Kearney finished third, 72 points, 13 back of Pitt State. Fort Hays fourth, 116, and Northwest Missouri fifth with 140. Casey Epps led Pitt State. Fourth place finish, 5K, 3.1 miles, ran 17:56. Pitt State with 5 of the top 20 runners in this one. Men running 8K, 4.96 miles, finished 8th out of 19 teams at Hays. Adams State also won on the men's side. Pitt State fourth among MIAA men's teams. Nebraska Kearney third. Fort Hays 4. Northwest Missouri 5. Then PSU 8. Austin Bogina led Pitt State. 25th place, running 25:18. Here's Pitt State cross-country coach Russ Jewett on the women's performance last weekend.
I was actually pretty pleased with our women's race. We held out our number one, Jess Macy, just to preserve her health. She didn't really need to prove anything by racing, and I was really proud of the other girls for stepping it up. And Casey Epps particularly was our number one runner at this competition. Had an outstanding race. Followed the race plan to a T and was tough when she needed to be. And I think that pretty much how the rest of the girls ran as well.
Does the race plan change based on what kind of course it is?
It can. If it's a real tight course, in other words, if the path isn't very wide, and if you don't get out in position very early, it's hard to make up ground. Sometimes it's physically hard to pass people. Impossible, maybe, if you're not ahead of them when it gets really tight. And that's kind of the case with this course. It narrowed down very quickly. There were 200-plus runners in the race, and most of our girls had a chance at beating most of the people in the race, but if we weren't in our goal position fairly early, it would be very hard to pass. So that was our race plan, was to be fairly aggressive to the first choke point and then try and relax and settle in and then finish strong, and I think we pretty much did that.
Is the race plan different for individual runners based on their strengths?
It can be. We really want to make this a team effort as much as possible and have a team strategy, but it is true that some athletes are physiologically or psychologically made up in such a way that a certain race style is more difficult for them. For instance, this going out hard and hanging on, you're hurting more early in the race. Even though you're in position, and psychologically it can be easier to race that way, but it can also be physically tougher. And some folks just don't handle the anaerobic, the oxygen debt as well, that long in a race. So sometimes an even pace is better for them.
We mentioned Casey Epps. She finished fourth, and Hannah DeVries 8. Alex Moss had 12th place finish. Paige White 16th. Carlin Green, your top 5. So that's pretty good. Top 5 runners in the top 19 in this particular race. Yeah,
our goal was to get a 30-second 1-to-5 gap, which is a pretty stiff bar to have there, and we were fairly close to that. I was really pleased with, I think Hannah DeVries is her first race this year in a uniform for us. She got injured early on and then came back a little too soon, and my mistake, and then got sort of re-injured. So it's been a little while for her to race, but she's done a great job cross-training and just having faith, and I was really pleased with her first outing.
Well, when you take a look at the fact you were off, and then you're going to be off this week and then the MIAA Championships, do you change your training patterns based on whether you have a race or not?
We do a little bit, and it depends on the race. If you have a race at the end of the week, sometimes we will not load them up a lot during the week. Certainly that will be the case next week with the conference meet. But you build toward 1 or 2 or 3 key races, key competitions in our sport. You don't build a record. Those meets that we have early in the year don't mean really anything in terms of their outcome. It's just building toward this championship season. So that's the philosophy pretty much everyone has, I think, Tom. And then the training in a given week, it is part of an overall plan that gets you ready for late October, early November.
Well, I mean, when you look at cross-country, we talked a little bit about this before, but you looked at Casey Epps' numbers, 17:56 at the 5K, and then on down the line. Pretty close. Your other 4 were within about 28 seconds of one another. You base success to a certain extent at this point on time and where you are physically as you gear for the end of the year?
Well, time is all relative. This was a fairly fast course. It wasn't real easy, but it was fairly fast. Some courses are slower, and some courses aren't real accurate in terms of how they're measured necessarily. That's not a requirement. You're just supposed to kind of get close. So times from course to course don't mean as much as maybe the times that you had on this course this year versus the same exact course this time last year. We do use time to that extent. And certainly from training, we use pace in training sometimes, and that translates into some race paces. But really it's more about position, I think, and who you're beating and what place you're in. But this concept of being close to one another in a race does help. A sort of a pack mentality is good as long as you're fairly evenly matched in terms of ability, because if you have a tight pack, but you're really doing that by holding a really good runner back, then you're not really helping your cause much. Or if you have a tight pack and you're all the way in the back of the race, that doesn't help your score much. So it's kind of a relative thing.
Tom Van Hoy visiting today with Russ Jewett, Pitt State men and women's cross country coach. Can you go to a meet where Adam State isn't there?
Well, sure you can, but we don't want to. We'd like to see Adam State. Now, admittedly, that was Adam State's sort of B team. I think they had one girl in that race. The girl that was their best runner there was, I think, their number 6 or 7 runner.
Really?
Overall. But, yeah, they just choose not to race a whole lot with their best runners. And that's kind of the same thing we do occasionally, just a philosophical thing. But we like to race against, some of the best around, so it was great to see some of their runners there.
Are some of the best teams that you go against, do they have a lot of foreign runners?
Not at our level so much, to be honest with you. There are some Kenyans out there. Central Missouri has a guy, and some of the best at our national level are international kids. You see it more at the Division I level, and you see it in track and field. In the other half of our sport, I guess, in track and field, you see it more at our level.
What was the quality competition for the women at this meet?
Oh, it was pretty good. It was decent. There were quite a few teams in there that had developmental sort of runners on them. There were a lot of bodies in the race, which made it a challenge. But there were some good runners in there. There certainly were. I mean, Adams State, there's a CSU Pueblo young lady who was excellent. Nebraska Kearney is a challenge, of course. So it was good quality.
Some junior college, community college schools as well. Does that... Do you recruit off of that, or can you take a look and maybe see a run? Do you think, you know what, maybe we ought to recruit that person?
Absolutely. There were a couple of young women in that race and a couple of guys that we are looking at, and it was good to get to see them race, and it's good to have them see you race and to race against you.
I mean, when you recruit somebody, a lot of times, you in terms of football or basketball, it's the style of play, and they want to go there for that particular reason. Is that, and I don't know, style of running or the approach, does that even come into become a factor at all when you're talking about getting a kid to come to your school? I
really think what kids look at from an athletic standpoint is, first of all, is there success there, and do they believe they'll have a chance at reaching their potential athletically at your place? But in cross-country particularly, they're looking for good relationship with the coach and good team chemistry, a good relationship among teammates. Team unity is really important to most successful high school cross-country runners as they look for a college program.
So let's flip it over to the men's side. Finished 8th out of 19. How'd your guys do out at Hayes, you think?
Well, it was a mild disappointment, actually, Tom. We held out a couple of guys with real sore legs, and we held out Adam Volkert, who, again, really didn't have anything to prove here. We didn't really need him to race to advance his fitness for the conference and the championship season. And I think maybe that takes a little wind out of your sails when your other guys know you're not full strength. You might race with a little thought in your head, hey, we're not full strength, so we sure didn't act full strength. So I was mildly disappointed. We're very fit right now. We're in the best shape, this men's team, that they've been in all year, and most of these guys are in the best shape of their lives. And we're not the most talented team in that race, certainly, and not in our conference, but I think we're better than what we showed. And the good news is that it's not a lack of fitness or being in shape. We just had a bad day, I think.
Well, with a relatively, I kind of look at the numbers here. Austin Bogina led the way for you at 25th at 25:18. Chris Wise at 25:32, and then you get up there a little bit more in 25-26 range. Overall, I mean, you said you're a little bit disappointed, but are those numbers halfway decent, I guess? Yeah,
they are, but again, it was a fast course. The times were a little faster on this course this year than they were last year. We didn't go to the meet last year, which compared winning times and the top 20 and et cetera. So and that has a lot to do with there's just more runners in the race this year. And you know, our guys, we have high standards. You know, I say I'm mildly disappointed. Our guys ran hard. You know, the difference between running hard, trying hard, and then racing well, because you put your effort in the wrong direction, or you know, I use the term you clench your teeth and grit your teeth and clench your fists rather, and that's not the way to try hard in cross country. So, you know, relaxed focus is something that escaped us a little bit this last weekend, and that's something that we can fix real quick.
Tom Van Hoy with Russ Jewett, Pitt State men and women's cross country coach. You look at the other MIAA teams that were there, and Nebraska Kearney finished second. Adams State, one of the men's side as well, then Hayes and Northwest Missouri. There's a pretty good difference in point total there as you look up to those teams. Are they pretty good MIAA teams?
Oh, they are, yeah. There's a lot of parity in the men's conference, though. A lot of parity. There's a couple teams that weren't even in this race that really are the favorites, I'd say, in our conference. So, no, Kearney, you know, their coach is very good, and he's got some very, very good runners there, and they race well. And Fort Hays State, you know, they were at home, and they're very comfortable on the course, but they're very well coached, and they've got some good, mostly Kansas kids, too. So, no, this is a tough conference. There's a lot of parity.
Well, you're off again this week, and then the MIAA Championships come up in Pittsburgh on the 26th. And just from a scheduling standpoint, are there a number of races? How many races, I guess, can you run? And is this? Do you like the way the schedule was set up this year?
Well, I prefer to race every other weekend. That's ideal, I think. Racing at the college level with the length of the races and some of the difficulty of the courses is pretty brutal. And if you race every weekend and then train hard as well, you're going to get a lot of kids injured. I say that, and then we've already got three kids sort of injured. But you try to preserve the health of your kids and balance the racing with the training. So every other week is ideal. But this year we had a couple of races that I really wanted to go to, and they happened to be back-to-back weekends. So it just depends on a coach's philosophy. You know, some coaches don't race their best folks more than a couple of times or one time before the conference championship. And we probably do a little more than that, but I certainly understand the rationale with the training that is necessary to be good.
Hey, we'll do a little more on this next week when the MIAA Championships usually gets a little bit closer anyway. But are there schools in the conference that, I don't know if take serious is the right terminology, but concentrate a little bit more on cross-country and want to do well in cross-country versus track and field?
Well, I think you probably have to ask them, but there are some schools that do a lot better in cross-country than they do in track and field, and it appears that maybe they concentrate on recruiting and developing distance runners more than a full balanced team. But really, there's no one that's all or nothing. You know, you don't see anyone that wins a conference in cross-country and finishes last in track, really. There are a couple that, you know, are on the high end of cross-country and low end of track, or vice versa. But when you have limited resources, some schools, I think, choose to emphasize an area more than others, so at least they can have some success at the conference level and maybe some success at the national level as well.
That's Pitt State men and women's cross-country coach Russ Jewett. No race this weekend, gearing up for the MIAA Championships in Pittsburgh on October the 26th. That's your Pitt State Cross Country Insider Show for this week. I'm Tom Van Hoy.